Hey gang, it's Ed here, and I want to talk to you about a really important concept. You've heard me talk about in the past how I really don't think there should be any risk-taking in an online business, apart from time, the time you spend. And I want to talk through that a little bit more about what I mean. And it also should change the way you think about the way you approach a market. We've talked about how when you are researching things, you tend to research, and tend not to go into a market. You'd rather make the decision not to go into a market rather than go forward. And that's completely natural. It happens an enormous amount. However, unfortunately, if you don't get in the field of play, of course, you don't get anywhere, right? You're not going to have a successful business or an unsuccessful business. So here's the thing. The new way of doing things, the new way of testing assumptions and going into a market means that you can get into the field of play while you're researching, while you're testing the market. Here's what I mean by that. When you're thinking about going into a particular market and you've given yourself a deadline, the first thing that you want to do after you've done your research, you've gone through your action plan, is to have a look at all the assumptions you've made. Literally get out pen and paper and write down all the assumptions you've made. Okay, and there'll be a heap. There should be a heap. I would like to think there was a heap. Now, you need to go through and rank those from 1, I'm completely and utterly uncertain about this, it's a pure guess, through to 10, I'm really certain about this, I really understand it. So go through and mark them on that scale, 1 through 10. Then, and here's the cool part, and I bet you've never thought about doing things like this, and it just makes such a difference because you can turn research into getting into the field of play, into potentially finding a successful market while moving forward and getting action, allowing that emerging strategy, allowing the thing that will actually work to appear. Because if you're not doing any action, it's like physics, right? If you don't apply any energy, that object is not going to move. So we take those assumptions and we look at the ones 10 to 1. Now, what are we going to do? We are going to have a look at the things that you are very uncertain about. Okay, and then we're going to ask this extraordinarily powerful question. What could we do that is quick, cheap, and fast to test this assumption so that we can move it from a very low level of certainty to a higher level of certainty? Think about that for a second. What can we do to test this assumption? How can we create a little experiment to figure out whether this assumption is valid or not? Because remember, we can only be right or wrong in hindsight. So this is where this gets really cool. So let me give you a practical example. I love talking about Hearthstone, which is a trading card game, which has recently, they just literally released just a couple of days before me recording this, that they now have 20 million players around the world. So when I'm looking at that market, the Hearthstone market, one thing I can be pretty certain of is that there are a large volume of people playing that. How do I know? Because the company itself, Blizzard, who makes this particular trading card game, it's an online game, they literally put out a press release saying they've got 20 million players now. So that to me is a 9 or a 10. I'm really certain of that assumption that there are lots of people playing this because there's some hard data there to back that up. Easy. What about the other end of the spectrum? I tell you what I am uncertain about is who is actually playing this. What is the demographic? Many, many years ago, I remember being involved in the MySpace market. Well, being involved, testing it out. And I thought I'd hit the gold mine. You know, I was literally building my MySpace list for people who wanted to pimp their MySpace page at thousands of people a day. I thought this was it. I was set. I was retired. You know what the trouble was? I'd made an assumption which I hadn't tested. Would this market actually buy anything? And it turns out they didn't. They didn't want to buy anything at all. And I spent tens of thousands of dollars chasing down this rabbit hole because I thought, oh, this is great. I was sucked in by the fact that there were so many opt-ins. So we don't want to do that anymore. We want to learn from that. So here's my issue with Hearthstone. Will people actually buy something? Will they buy any information products about this particular market? What are they interested in buying? Now, my research has told me that there are people who are offering coaching, which sounds pretty appealing to me. That's interesting, but I don't know how well that's working or if it's working at all. I've got no data to back that up. So how would I test this assumption? Because really I'm rating my certainty level on this is like 1 or 2. So how can I test this over the course of the next week without committing myself to the market massively, without spending 8 months developing a product only to release it and find nobody wants to buy it? Well, this is just one way of doing it, okay? So the first thing I would do is I would look for some form of affiliate product. And sure enough, just before I recorded this, I actually went to ClickBank, which is a great source of affiliate products, and there was a guide on Hearthstone. And the great thing about ClickBank is I don't even have to talk to the person who created that course. I can just use my ClickBank code and I will be able to embed that in websites or email campaigns or anywhere I like. Because what do I want to test? I want to test to see if this market will buy stuff, okay? So one test, just one test that I could create is a test where I advertise on Facebook because let's think about it. Okay, Hearthstone players, is there an official Hearthstone page? Yes, there is. Fantastic. I'm going to advertise on that page because, of course, with Facebook, you can say, I would like to advertise this to anybody who likes this particular page. Boom. Easy. Okay, and there's plenty of other places I could try, but this is a great place to test, right? And there are literally, this page has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of likes, so there's a decent volume there. So I can create an ad into a funnel to sound out whether people are interested in learning about, say, strategy guides as one example, because that's something that I thought maybe people would like to see, how to do deck building and things like that. So I can create a funnel. I can set up a MailChimp autoresponder, and it will cost me nothing to do. It takes about 10 minutes to set up. I can use Market Pro Max to set up a opt-in page and an information page about this particular product, and I can set about capturing people's emails. Now I can spend a couple of hours writing up an email sequence for people so that at the end of this sequence I would offer them to buy this affiliate product. Now, rather than me spend 8 months going through this, it would take me literally half a day to set up a really decent test of this market. And what do I learn? I learn, okay, can I get traffic from this particular Facebook page? That's one thing I can learn. What's the conversion? How many people actually click on that link? So what's the cost per click? I get that piece of information. How many people do that? What's the click-through rate as they describe it? How many people who arrive at my opt-in page will then opt in, and so I can figure out how quickly I can build my list from that source. And then ultimately, how many people buy. So as I put people through this funnel, I'll do that. And here's the cool thing, that whole process will take me less than a day or two to set up. I'm in the field, I'm testing, I'm getting all sorts of valuable data, and it'll probably cost me, $20 to $30 a day in test money on Facebook to do that. How else could I test this assumption? Well, I could go to Amazon, for example, and type in Hearthstone guides, and I bet you there's dozens, if not hundreds of guides. And what I can do is then compare how they are selling, because Amazon very helpfully ranks everything. So I can compare that sales rank to a product that I know the sales figures for to figure out how well those sorts of guides are selling. That's another way to test that assumption. That is even quicker and even cheaper than what I just described. Do you see where I'm coming from with this? If you change your approach to think about okay, here are all the assumptions I've got in this market. These ones I'm pretty certain of. Let's put those to one side for the moment. Let's take the ones that I'm most uncertain of, and then let's create experiments. Do you see the psychology I'm trying to use here? Experiments. Everybody loves an experiment. Who doesn't love an experiment? It's not like I am throwing my whole thing, this Hearthstone has to work because I need it to pay my mortgage, right? I'm not putting that weight on. All I'm saying is, let's do some experiments to test some assumptions that I have in this particular market. Here's the thing I know for certain, and I'll finish up with this today. The person in that market who does the most experiments wins. It's that simple. If you want to be a person who's really successful and a major influencer in that market, you conduct the most experiments. And by calling it experiment, it's funny. It's a funny little phrase, but the power is immense. Because experiments are fun. They pass or fail. You know, it's like you're back in, chem prac, back in high school, and, you're creating that sulfur dioxide and trying to stink out the room. I did that. It was very good. We had to evacuate the room. It was excellent. But the point being is it's not like you are investing your whole certainty, your whole net worth. The failure of an experiment is just a failure of an experiment. It's not like a personal indictment on you. Whereas what I'm afraid when people try to choose markets, they think, oh, I've got to the right one. I've got to research this within an inch of my life, and I'm not going to do a single thing because I don't want to fail. That's a completely natural response. But I think if you use this way of thinking, it'll change everything. So why don't you give that a go? List those assumptions, rank them 1 to 10 in level of certainty, and then have a look at those bottom assumptions, the 1s and 2s, and ask yourself, what's an experiment I can create that is cheap and fast to do that? And you workshop that, it'll change your approach. And then guess what? Conduct the experiments, and you're off to the races. Hope you find that useful. I would love to hear from you. Send me a tweet at ed_dale. And of course, if you've seen this video anywhere other than the eddale.co blog, that's where all the action is, because that's where all the comments are, and I'd love to hear from you about what you thought about today's. Please leave a comment. I love that. I reply to the comments. I read them all. Not me, not a team member. I do it myself because I love it. We've been doing this experiment for a while, and it's really fantastic, and particularly in the run-up to the next challenge, for you guys to be able to get that and do this feedback and speak to one another like this, it really has been awesome. So with that, you have a great week wherever you happen to be, and just try it. I'd really love to hear from you, and really hope you try this, because it's a completely different way of thinking about things, very non-traditional for online marketing, but I tell you what, it's a powerful approach. All right, we'll speak soon.